I'm Rob Whiten from the Innsmouth Book Club. Join me and my fellow guide John Chadwick as we take you on a fortnightly tour of Innsmouth. We visit places such as the Picture House, the Library and Innsmouth Museum to discuss all aspects of weird fiction, whether it be book, film, music, TV or art. As well as that, we stop over at the Gilman House to have a chat with a resident guest. That includes authors, artists, musicians, in fact Lovecraftian creatives of all types. You can find our free shows on Patreon, and there you can also sign up as a patron, which brings you bonus content, plus a monthly PDF copy of Innsmouth News, which features articles, author spotlights, all the latest news and reviews, and more. You can find us at patreon.com/InnsmouthBC. We hope to see you soon, because remember, Innsmouth isn't just a place, it's a state of mind.
Hey everyone, it's me, DB. Just reminding you, we have t-shirts in the shop. Just go to pgttcm.com. Check out all of our cool t-shirts and stickers. Heck, we even got some shelf curtains in there. Keep clean, look cool, have cool stickers to put on stuff. Join us on Patreon and get a free sticker. Or don't. It's up to you.
You're listening to KZOM, Oleander Public Radio.
Greetings, listeners. It is I, DB Spitzer and Farmer Dave, here once again to talk to you about the Cthulhu mythos, its books, its monsters, its unfortunate human casualties, its timeline in general, and even its tangential bits, like the dreamlands or things of a weird nature that are Lovecraftian leaning. Once more we head into those dark woods, further feeling those malevolent forces upon us. Once again we walk down the lightless stone staircase in the middle of nowhere.
You're listening to KZOM.
Hey everybody, it is me, DB Spitzer, and right over here is Farmer Dave, David Heath. Dave, how the heck is it going?
It is going good. And for those of you who are listening to this on Thursday, we may or may not have new baby goats. The baby goats are scheduled to first arrive on Wednesday. But do you know the first rule of goats?
What's that?
Goats are stubborn.
Yeah, I've heard that. Let's see. Everything's going pretty well in my neck of the woods. The mayor has ordered some land movers to fill in the collapsed section of the cemetery. Can't read about that. And also, let's see.
We're not supposed to discuss the mysterious lights over Six Witches Woods either.
No.
So we are not discussing the mysterious lights over Six Witches Woods.
No, nor the mysterious burrows in the deep in the sinkholes in the graveyard. We can talk about the upcoming Spring Festival. So look forward to the Spring Festival in...
Now, for those of you that are not familiar with Oleander, Oregon, this is not the spring like the season spring. No, this is like springs like in mattresses and cars.
Yes.
Because there once was a spring factory here.
Yep.
That was converted in 1942 into the military springs, which... we're not allowed to talk about the military advent use of springs during World War II. So
let me just tell you something.
We're the only people that have dedacted holidays.
Yes. No.
Redacted.
We also have a shoe factory, or had a shoe factory in town, and a spring factory. Doesn't take a genius to try and figure out what the military was trying to do and why we're not allowed to talk about it.
No.
I don't know. That's a personal conspiracy around town But I think it just happens to be that. Anyway, let's
But
carry
know
on.
what we
Let's
are
carry on.
allowed to talk about?
What's that?
Our guest this week.
Oh, we can finally talk about this. This is great. Yeah.
Yes.
It's been months in the making.
The one, the legendary Ramsey Campbell.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. No. Ramsay Campbell, friend on social media, friend of the show. Ramsay Campbell. Finally got him on. We've done enough episodes about him, and yeah. No. I'm excited. I am super excited.
So they say never meet your heroes.
Yeah.
No, Mr. Campbell Ramsey, he is just completely pleasant.
Oh, definitely.
Person, very, very well spoken, but a true gentleman in the truest sense.
Oh, certainly.
So,
certainly.
Yeah, very fortunate that he was willing to be on the show. And so we do a little teaser here. I'm not sure if it's out anywhere else, but if you listen to the end of the interview, he announces a non-horror project I think will surprise people.
Cool.
That hopefully will be coming out this year. And I think if people listen carefully to the interview, they're going to be kind of surprised which this historical work, and it truly is a form of pop culture history, that he's hopefully going to have out by the end of the year. And I'm not sure he's announced it anywhere else.
Whoa.
Maybe he has.
I'm excited. So, yeah, look forward to that in this episode. And let's see. What do we got on the chopping block this month, Dave?
Well,
this
and
week?
this was not prepared.
Yeah.
But it just so happens that we're in the G's, and we're discussing two of Ramsey Campbell's creations.
Oh, that's cool, because as some people know, we're just kind of like going alphabetically currently these few seasons, and yeah, we are in the. We just finished Ghouls last week, and this week it's GHROTH, and let's see, what else do we got? GLAAKI. Oh, wow, yeah. I like to cover GLAAKI. We've covered GLAAKI a few times, but I think every time we learn a little bit more and we grow a little bit more. It's we're going with the Ithian method. We're we just keep going back and forth all around until we get it.
The more we have GLAAKI on the show, the more he grows in our heart.
Exactly. With a big spike. So, Dave, what are you drinking this morning?
So I had goat's milk.
Goat's milk. Oh wow! Did you get that from Uncle Owen's goat farm?
Yes, I did.
Very nice, very nice. And if you're an Oleander, you too can get some goat's milk from Uncle Owen's dairy farm, and also soap is available as well. I myself am having some Copper Cow coffee. I am going with the churro flavor, which is a wonderful, wonderful cinnamony coffee, and it's just a quick little pour over. You pull it out, you pour some water in it, you let the water drip out, and it fills the cup. 3 to 5 ounces of water is generally what you need. And then you add a little creamer if you want, or if you want, you add a little extra water. And if you're over the age of 21, why not put a splash of something in it to make it, I don't know.
Are you talking about goat's milk?
I'm talking about an adult beverage. But goat's milk, oh wow, that would be really good creamer too. Anyway, but yeah, no, Copper Cow coffee, you can look in the show notes, get yourself some Copper Cow coffee, and call it a good morning. It's like breaks down to, like, if you get a subscription of it, if you get a package of it, get a subscription for it, it's like $1.40 a thing for like the black coffee just itself. And I love the black coffee just by itself. No creamer, boom. And if you're like, well, I like sugar and I like cream, then you're going to love this stuff. The black coffee, just an amazing flavor, makes just kind of like a nice base palette for whatever you like to do with your morning coffee. But I like this much, I like that much. Well, figure out how to do it yourself. I'm not your personal chef. Copper Cow Coffee. I'm not your personal chef. So, we're talking about GLAAKI today, right?
Yes, we are.
Okay. So, Dave, I have multiple times been accused of being a cultist of GLAAKI, or having a portrait in my attic of a much older, gross-looking me. I don't quite age anymore. I quit aging sometime around 26, 27. But Cultist of GLAAKI, I mean, that's one of my personal favorite. Than other people like being like, oh, you're like Benjamin Button or something, and it's like, no. But yeah, GLAAKI. There's a cult. I know that there's a cult of GLAAKI. There's like GLAAKI has its own ghoulies and
his own book.
The
Revelations of GLAAKI.
Yeah, so like a bunch of books, or is it just one book?
So it is a series of books.
Scriptures, which could probably be compiled into one book, honestly. But then again, GLAAKI does like to talk.
and so, yes. So, GLAAKI is, as I said, created by Ramsey Campbell. And he is, I believe, first appears in The Inhabitant of the Lake.
Yes.
Spoiler. He is the inhabitant of the lake.
Correct.
And he is an outer god who basically looks like if you crossed a slug with a porcupine.
As old as the stars themselves, GLAAKI has a vast reservoir of knowledge. Not only of the supernatural entities that exist on Earth, but those which predate it.
Sorry.
Yes, that is true. And then they throw people onto him. They get impaled by his porcupine spikes and become zombie-ish.
Ooh. That's yikes.
So and Ramsey talks a little bit about this in our interview, that he absolutely definitely goes through a Lovecraftian phase, and that he wants to sort of gets to a point where he wants to put his own creatures, his own gods, in this sort of Lovecraft universe. And he's just a little too young to be alive and active during correspondence.
Sure.
During Lovecraft's life. But he's one of the later most influential correspondents with Derleth.
Yeah.
And the very famous story, and he'll talk about it, where Derleth says, stop setting your stories here in America. You're English. Tell us the English stories.
Yeah.
But he still does the things that are required to be a part of the Lovecraftian circle or something. And that's create your own book or set of books. So Lovecraft has got, the Necronomicon, then of course, we have, the Book of the Worm or the Vietnamese Mysteries. So everybody gets a book. And so Campbell's book is the Revelations of GLAAKI. And it is written by a man named Thomas Lee. And Thomas Lee is sort of a messiah figure. And if I had really been thinking about it, I would ask him this question. His new trilogy sort of is the history of this messiah figure. And I wonder, maybe Thomas Lee is kind of this predecessor to the sort of the antagonist in his new trilogy. But Thomas Lee is a cultist who lives by the lake where GLAAKI lives. And you're right. He receives this revelations. He receives this knowledge that GLAAKI shares with him.
Yeah.
And so there's 12 books, but when they get down to actually printed down volume, there's 9.
Yeah.
And so the difference kind of the revelations of GLAAKI is that this is basically Thomas Lee is GLAAKI's prophet, to put it in Judeo-Christian words.
Yeah.
So where we've got, you do have, Von Zutz and these other people who come out. It's sort of different in that, he's not infiltrating a cult, like he's not learning magic like Abdul al-Hazarad. He's not translating ancient scriptures. He is the direct communication pipeline from their god to the cult. And he writes this down. And then I believe there is like one missing book that's supposed to have all the terrible, terrible secrets.
Oh, yeah. But... No. GLAAKI is a terrible, terrible thing to humans. I was thinking about, there is a revelation of GLAAKI in cold print. For even the minions of Cthulhu dare not speak of Ygolinak. Yet the time will come when Ygolinak strides forth from the loneliness of eons to walk once among men. And my thought is, did GLAAKI really say that? Is, GLAAKI afraid of Ygolinak? And that, people should be worried about Ygolinak in comparison to Cthulhu? And it's wait a minute. What does GLAAKI know that we don't know? And is, or is it just that, GLAAKI and Ygolinak are both in England, so they, have each other's back, and they're oh, yes, no, we are both very terrible. Speak to Ygolinak. Ygolinak will tell you the same.
There's this infinite rabbit hole you could go down here.
Yeah.
So part of it is, so we assume that this is GLAAKI.
Yeah.
But we got to take Thomas Lee's word on it.
Totally.
And Thomas Lee is not necessarily a reliable narrator.
Correct.
Abdul al-Hazarad is not. Abdul al-Hazarad tells us that the Shoggoth don't exist anymore.
Yeah, that's the thing that I was going to say is this is not the best person to talk to. He doesn't even believe in Shoggoths are real.
So also, when you get into theology.
Yes.
And there is this question. How God communicates with humans. So does God communicate to its prophets in human language, Hebrew, Arabic, English, whatever? Or does God show visions and the prophets or send feelings or something that are closer to waves of thought?
Yeah.
Does God communicate verbally? Does God communicate psychically? And so the question is, if you believe, and I'm not attacking or defending anybody's scriptures.
Sure.
But how does God speak to you?
Yeah.
If God is speaking to you, does he speak in the Queen's English? Does he speak in feelings that you have to interpret it? Does he show you pictures? Or does he tell you, write this down word for word? So, for the fun of it, we can go down that rabbit hole. Obviously, English is not GLAAKI's first language.
Yeah.
is these impressions that Thomas Lee and Abdul Al-Hazarad and Kamante de Ortele, how do these gods communicate? And we see some of it in the dreams that the sculptor makes in the horror and clay.
Yeah.
That is that's an interpretation of his dreams.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, there is this sort of, even if this is, and I use air quotes here, a divine source,
sure,
a higher source.
Yeah.
How is it interpreted? Now that is, of course, this is a completely fictitious universe.
Sure, yeah.
How the divine communicates with the humans, that's a real theological question, and I'm not quite sure Ramsey Campbell was bringing this in, but that's this huge sort of, rabbit hole. How do these more powerful entities, if the dogs are going to write the Bible of the Masters, and the voice said, "I was a good boy. I'm a good boy. I'm a good boy." This divine knowledge is being sent to a corruptible, physical human being with this language that robbed 12 other languages.
Yeah.
But that's kind of a huge rabbit hole tangent right there.
Yeah. I was going to say that on some sort of molecular, metaphysical, we can't see it because we're not fourth dimensional creatures. Because I don't believe GLAAKI is of the same space stuff as we are. I think GLAAKI's extra dimensional. But something about GLAAKI's spines, when we are pierced by them, we're in direct connection with GLAAKI. I think it's just either GLAAKI is some sort of created abomination, or some sort of the biggest of its species, or the only example of its species. If we're going to think about great old ones just as space monsters, as we commonly do on this show, and my thoughts is the big old spine in the whatever it is that GLAAKI does that then turns a human into an undead thing, also then is probably also giving it a direct connection into its nervous system, its whole biological system. GLAAKI just takes you over. And I think that's how GLAAKI communicates with you. If GLAAKI is making it so that you're no longer aging, GLAAKI is probably also communicating with your brain directly and able to put pictures in your brain. But I don't know if GLAAKI is no, let me edit this for you. Okay, come on, there, and there. Get it right. No, it's just stuff like that, and being no, I wanted you to say about how Yagalanak isn't as cool as Cthulhu, because I know Cthulhu. We both hang out in water. We're awesome buds.
GLAAKI does kind of come off sort of as the gossip girl of the outer gods.
Oh, sure.
Definitely willing to spill some tea.
Yeah.
And that, of course, Campbell uses this as a device throughout his stories. So, he can say, we know about Yagalanak because there's a revelation of GLAAKI about it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I mean, that's pretty cool stuff. I like the idea that it's on notebook paper and it's from the 1800s, the late 1800s. But yeah.
Yes. So there's I think that GLAAKI too has sort of a rebirth in the 80s with the Chaosium role-playing game.
Oh, definitely.
Because it makes such an awesome creature.
Sure,
The first or one of the first, games that I played as a character in called Cthulhu Role Playing. It was a GLAAKI story.
Yeah.
And the first story that I sort of read on, I'm not even sure if I think I ended up cannibalizing. The first Call of Cthulhu adventure I wrote out was a GLAAKI. And the idea was that, the adventurers would fly over the lake.
Uh-huh.
And they would see it sort of rising. One of the best adventures I ever had was a GURPS Warehouse 23, taken during World War II, where the team, the Detachment 23, had to basically stop a group of Japanese mystics from raising GLAAKI from a lake in Papua New Guinea.
Ooh.
So I sort of teamed them up. There was, I teamed with a team of 11 Marines. Because there was 11 Doctor Who's now, and each of these Marines had the name of an actor who played Doctor Who.
Gotcha.
And I think they lost half of them. But with a comic book character I love was Jenny Sparks, who lives the entire century, the 20th century. Her power is electricity, and so they end up having to basically electrocute this version of GLAAKI.
Oh, cool.
I think that there definitely is a resurgence now. As we have definitely said, with the exception of the writings of C.M. Eddy, or that Lovecraft wrote with C.M. Eddy, all of Lovecraft's stuff is public domain.
Yeah. What did Lovecraft write with C.M. Eddy?
The only thing that I can think of off the top of my head is The Beloved Dead.
Oh,
I think he wrote about 4.
Which one's that? What? Which ones are those?
The Beloved Dead is about the necrophiliac killing a family and living in their house.
Okay. All right.
But we'll have a CM Eddy episode.
Yeah.
But the second generation creatures are still copyrighted.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I think that there are very...
whether it be, Cathoans or Brian Lumley, and then all the super cool Ramsey Campbell deities and underlings. Yeah, no, there's some other stuff too.
and
sure.
Now, Chaosium, of course, works very well with these people.
Yeah.
And there are books of... that collect other people's short stories versions, but so the second generation, we don't have people writing like they do Cthulhu, but we do have this resurgence through the role-playing games, especially Chaosium.
Definitely, and I remember really kind of falling in love with the image of GLAAKI from, I think it was the D20 Call of Cthulhu game, and being like, whoa, I like this GLAAKI. This is a good GLAAKI right here. So,
yeah, I think that's pretty much GLAAKI in the nutshell there.
Yeah. That's GLAAKI there. And up next, we're going to be talking to Ramsey Campbell about Ramsey Campbell and Ramsey Campbell deities and whatever else Dave came up with. And
like I said, and stay to the end, because there's going to, hopefully this year he's going to have a huge pop culture reference history book out that I think people will be surprised, but I'm really, really excited.
Me too.
As well as his new book is out now.
Okay, cool. That's awesome. So, yeah, check that out. And after that, you're going to find out how you can use a Ramsey Campbell, I don't know, outer god called GOL-GOROTH. Yeah. And
Go Wrath, young man.
GOL-GOROTH.
Oh, that was Go West. Sorry.
No problem. All right, we'll see you after the break, everyone.
Thank you once again for listening to People's Guide to the Cthulhu Mythos. You can help show your support by going to the show notes and following any of the links that'll tell you how to support the show and how to support our guests. And thank you to all of our guests who you can find in the show notes. Rate, review, subscribe, and remember, patrons get priority access to asking us questions, suggesting topics, even, submitting stuff. Actually, you don't have to be a patron to submit anything. That's how Dave got on the show, and that's how you can get on the show too. It's the People's Guide to the Cthulhu Mythos. Rate, review, subscribe, tell your friends. Thank you for listening. Back to the show.
So we are really excited about a guest that we have today, and that is Ramsey Campbell. And Mr. Campbell, I think I may have mentioned this. You know, I was going through a period in my life where it wasn't bad. In fact, it was a lot better than I thought. But it's the first time in my life where I discovered me time. And some of your books were some of the first things that I started reading when I started developing me time. And I'm sure people tell you this all the time, but just how grateful I was that I could have something to sort of escape the problems I thought were so big that now, 20 years later, it looks so small. So thank you so much.
Oh, well, thank you. Thanks for having me as well.
Well, thank you. So I'm also excited because you've got a new trilogy, a third book out on the trilogy. Can you tell our audience a little bit about this?
Yeah, well, should we talk about the trilogy in general to begin with, maybe, huh?
Would we please?
Yes, okay. Well, let me say this. It was. I have to thank my great friend Pete Crowther, he of PS Publishing here in Britain, because it was as a very basically it was his idea, to the extent that he came to me years ago. Now I imagine we're probably talking about something like 10 years ago at a convention, where we often meet up, and he thought somebody ought to write a cosmic horror trilogy, basically. He felt I should do it. Now, I was initially very resistant to this, not because I don't want to do cosmic terror, which is a favorite thing of mine, but I just basically felt there has to be a reason to write a trilogy, not just a very long novel that you then chop into 3 separate volumes. There's got to be a reason why it is in 3 volumes. And for quite a while, for years, I suppose, it seemed to me that I couldn't find one. Eventually, though, it occurred to me that, what about following the central characters across most of their lives? So, the first volume begins in the 50s, when they're in their early adolescence. The second volume is set in the mid-1980s, when they're now in adulthood, and the third, is in their late years, in fact, and it's coming up to something like the present. Although actually, I wasn't to anticipate the pandemic or anything like the disasters that are surrounding us now. But, although it does turn pretty apocalyptic in its own way, and in parallel with these 3 central characters, Dominic and his friends Jim and Bobby Roberta, we have this cult, the cult of run by Christian Noble, which is basically the cult of Deoloth, although disguised initially as a kind of spiritualist church. that is gaining in power over the 3 successive volumes. And by the way of the worm, which is the one which is now just imminent out this very week, the cult is out there in plain sight. It's got palatial accommodation on the Liverpool waterfront and elsewhere all over the world, and it's it's politicians and various dignitaries and celebrities freely openly acknowledge their membership in it, and the fact it's still keeping secrets about exactly what it does doesn't prevent it from being really just kind of overlooked, although it's in plain sight, or not seen for what it is, which obviously heaven help us is what we're seeing all over the world. The kind of descent into irrationality and the espousement of cults, particularly the kind that will answer all your questions so long as you give up the right to ask any. And so these were some of the things I had in mind in the trilogy. And add to this, I suppose, that there's a parallel with Christian Noble and his developing family, his daughter and grandson, who again, of course, gain in age as the 3 volumes progress, and again they become a much more powerful entity, and ultimately, reveal something either less or more than human about them. And basically I'm trying to work my way through my own mythos that I created, gosh, when I think about it, when I was 16 years old, in parallel, if you like, with Lovecraft's mythos, or if you like, my own little contribution to it. Because back then, when I wrote my first Lovecraftian stories, I didn't just want to recycle Lovecraftian entities, because I felt he'd already done those better than anybody else could. I wanted to try and invent things of my own. Whether I was equipped to do them justice when I was in my mid-teens, I seriously doubt, which is why I've come back to them again.
Interesting and fascinating. And just for those who are listening and are excited, could we get the names of the different novels so that our audience can go, and if they haven't read the first 2, look for those, but also that the third one is out now?
Yes, just out right now. Well, the first one is The Searching Dead, and that's the one set in the 1950s and very much draws upon my experience of living in Liverpool back then. So while it's not strictly autobiographical, a lot of the detail certainly is, from my observation and memory. And in that one, the cult exists as the Trinity Church of the Spirit, which is purports to be a kind of spiritualist church that will put you in touch with your lost loved ones, but is in fact using the recently dead as a sort of proxy to go into places where the cultists would not dare to go. And it's kind of, if you like, it's my variation on the case of Charles Dexter Ward, the bringing back to life and the use of the dead. Born to the Dark is the second volume, in which Dominic has now, as I say, has grown up, got married, had a son, only to discover that the son is being drawn in, the very young son is being drawn into what is now the new face of this cult. And in the way of the worm, as I said, it's now out there in open sight as the Church of the Eternal Three. But the Eternal Three, it sort of reinterprets the Bible in terms of Deoloth, my old render of the veils, my early creation, if you like, and is basically leading to an apocalypse. And well, I think I did manage to deliver, the cosmic by the end of that novel. Certainly hope so, anyway.
Excellent. And in fact, you're actually, Campbell Country is sort of synonymous for taking cosmic horror and putting it in your own backyard. It's even a codified trope. What were some of maybe these books, but originally books, what were some of the things maybe growing up or you experienced that helped you create the current situation, but also the Severn Valley?
Well, that was more August Derleth's recommendation. You see, when I wrote the first draft of those stories that were collected, as The Inhabitant of the Lake, that first Arkham House book of mine, they were set in Lovecraft country. They were set in Massachusetts, Arkham, Dunwich, and so forth. Now, Derleth quite rightly said, well, what I needed to do was to relocate them to England, somewhere I knew better, because it was very evident that I, had never been outside England and knew nothing about Lovecraft's country other than what I'd read in Lovecraft himself. Now, actually, little did Derleth know that I'd never been to the Severn Valley either, so my version of that was pretty fantastical too, or at least, it was at the very most, it was a kind of basic sketch of the place based on books that I'd read. It wasn't until years later that I went there and found, well, in some ways it wasn't altogether unlike what I'd invented, but all that was based on research, not personal observation and experience. But at least, I did create somewhere new. Now, when I think about it, I could have gone to Chester, which is a lot nearer where I live, and I could have visited that, and that area was similar. Because Derleth did make this point that, it was an old Roman area, and that, the kind of Roman practices, the darker Roman practices could be incorporated into the ideas behind it, which was a fine idea of his, and I did try and do that. But basically, I invented most of the legends, but pretty well all of them. Well, no, actually, to be fair, the room in the castle, the thing about the Berkeley toad, that is a real legend actually, and so is the witch of Berkeley. So even in those early days, I was trying to incorporate bits of actual legend. I mean, later
the folklore of the area.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, those were the only two I really found. I mean, the rest of it is pretty well invented. But the other thing, you see, I feel about those earlier stories is that, I feel sort of guilty. I've always felt guilty that what I did was I took some of Lovecraft's ideas which he had not used, because, as I say, I didn't want to recycle ones that he had used. But I took bits out of the Commonplace book, and I took old Shubnigurath, to pronounce him correctly, I hope, and basically invented a description of him, because I asked Derleth about this, and he couldn't think of any description Lovecraft had made of that particular entity. Now, in fact, Lovecraft did describe it to some extent in a letter, but it's possible Derleth had forgotten that, and it was not one that he reprinted in the selected letters, I don't think, or certainly not by the time I was discussing it with him. So I came up and made up a shape for the creature, but frankly, I don't think I really did it. I don't think I was capable at the age of 16 to do that proper justice. And the one I've always regretted was the insects from Shagai, or Shagai, I forget, depending on how you want to pronounce that. Now, that's based on a Lovecraft, I think I'm correct in saying, was the very last note Lovecraft put in his Commonplace book. It was based on this tremendous dream he had of walking in the woods near Providence, or certainly in a forest anyway, and meeting a swarm of insects which penetrated his skull and immediately set off their own memories of alien vistas, and other planets, other worlds, and so forth. Now, it's a tremendous idea, one of Lovecraft's most evocative. But the thing was, he meant just a swarm of insects, not a swarm of giant insects that travel around in spacecraft, which is what, unfortunately, I did with the idea, and I regretted that for decades. And so I tried to rescue it in a novel of mine it's actually round about the turn of the century, called The Darkest Part of the Woods. And so I tried to use that idea again with I hope, a bit more reticence and a bit more kind of delicacy. And also, I would just mention that, again, The Darkest Part of the Woods was a novel of mine where the template was effectively the case of Charles Dexter Ward. And I actually, refer in passing to Joseph Curwen in the hope that people will spot the reference.
Wow, yeah, and now I'm going to go ahead and reread it, and I'm going to have a completely different perspective.
Okay.
What other ways, just obviously as a human being, as we grow older, we change. Yes. What other ways do you think maybe you've changed as a writer?
Well, I mean, I suppose less dependence on Lovecraft. Certainly, in the early days, I was pastiching Lovecraft in the early stories, the early Lovecraftian stories that I did. Although even there, it's kind of interesting to me that I seem to have worked through most of the Lovecraftian modes in those early ones. So that the something like the Church in High Street is his kind of florid style. The Insects from Chicago is very much a sort of pulp kind of a story, but it also tries to do the history of an alien race that you find in Up the Mountains of Madness, for instance. The Horror from the Bridge has a more sort of sober style, so that's beginning to try and embrace his documentary,
which is personally one of my favorite.
Oh, thank
Sorry,
you.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I love that story.
Thank you. And then from that point onward, really the stories begin to move away, and well, they don't sound that much like me, but they don't sound quite so much like Lovecraft. And even in something like the Will of Stanley Brooke, I was trying to find out. This is something I do every so often, just as a sort of exercise to see what will happen. To do without something that I depend on as a writer for the duration of a story, and see what happens then. And of course, the Will of Stanley Brooke is written very, very largely in dialogue, and with a completely flat, affectless prose, with no, deliberate avoidance of atmosphere and that sort of a thing. To see what would happen if I did that. Now, again, you see, I don't think I was equipped to do it, because the characters really come out as a kind of, the sort of characters you would find in a second-rate country house detective story. But it was an attempt to do it. Even then, I was trying to develop what I did, and then gradually, with stuff like, say, cold print, I began to incorporate decidedly non-Lovecraftian kinds of people, in a Lovecraftian story. I think that was one of the moves that I made. And later on, I've come back to more to my mythos, if you like, my little kind of Britchester mythos, and tried to do it in terms of the way I approach things now. I am sort of fond of the last revelation of GLAAKI, that novella I did, because I think that tries to turn it into a sort of comedy of paranoia, which is something I've gone in for over the decades since. But also, I had a lot of fun with it. But I do hope it also ultimately works as a kind of accumulation of Lovecraftian suggestions that eventually delivers an appropriately spectacular finale, and brings back GLAAKI, and again I hope does it a bit more justice than I could at 16 years old.
Yeah, no, excellent. Now I wonder though, not only you, but what do you think? Sort of asking you to look into your crystal ball now, but what do you think the future of horror, or maybe the future of your writing, is going to be like?
Well, you see, I'm often asked that question, but I have no such prescience. I mean, I suppose my flippant answer is, if I knew what the future of horror was going to be, I'd do it and not tell anybody else till I'd done it. But, I really don't know. And all I can say about myself is, I try not to repeat myself. I try to develop as a writer. I'm never satisfied with what I've done really well. Sometimes I'm for a little while, and then I come back and look at it and think, I could have done that better. And so, rather than try and rewrite it, which I try not to do, again, sure. I would rather try and develop maybe that theme again in a different way and see if I can get it, that little bit better. As far as the field is concerned, though, again, I don't know, and I always resist naming people who I admire, because I always think, as soon as I finish doing it, I'm going to think, oh Lord, no, I left them out, and those two guys as well. But what I can say is I really genuinely think that we're in another golden age of the field. There's an enormous amount of vigorous talent out there at the moment, both in the mainstream, mass market, and also certainly in the independent sector. I mean, there are lots of very fine small presses, who are doing splendid work and supporting, very, very talented writers. So, and I think we're obviously seeing more diversity in the field, more new and varied voices, which it could only be a healthy thing. So, I mean, and I don't know what the future is going to be, but I hope I live to see it.
And that's kind of my answer. I mean, I am just so curious sometimes, between, personally, I kind of hope I'm surprised. I'm a terrible person. I love being a know-it-all and telling everybody, but I kind of like to be surprised with the new stuff's coming out.
Sure. And I mean, I must admit, for me, this is a different thing, I know, but my thing, whenever I come to my desk where I'm talking to you right now, I'm up here, I'm by sort of 6 in the morning usually, 7 days a week. But whenever I'm writing a new draft, particularly, and even when I'm rewriting, but particularly a new first draft, I want to surprise myself. I want to write something I didn't know I was going to write till I wrote it, and I hope that that it comes that way across to the reader as well. Excellent.
Now, this is kind of our signature question for the show. We always sort of finish up the interview portion with this question.
Yes.
If you could be put of any creative project, any medium, don't worry about money, don't have to worry about copyrights, you have complete charge. What is your dream project?
Well, I was a bit stumped by that for a while because I knew you were going to ask it. But when I think about it, yes, I do have a sort of dream project. As long as we're fantasizing, well, let's hope it happens anyway. If I, had unlimited funds and unlimited, people to employ and all that stuff, I would get together a team of searchers and researchers who could track down the original preview print of Orson Welles' film The Magnificent Ambersons, because I don't know if you know about this, but what happened to that film is, to my mind, the greatest act of vandalism in the history of the cinema, because basically it was pretty well a 2-hour movie, the one he made after Citizen Kane. The sneak preview got some very bad kind of opinion cards from the audience. So RKO, who produced it, took it away from Welles, cut half an hour out of it, put on a happy ending, re-edited various sequences, and that's the version we live with now. And what you can see now is like 2/3 of a masterpiece. Basically, it would, I think, have been as great as Citizen Kane in its own way. Now, who knows? I mean, out there somewhere in a shed in Brazil or something like that, maybe, there's that one existing copy, because supposedly they did send a copy of the preview print to Welles himself, who was over there shooting another film. And after all, not so very long ago, in I think it wasn't a shed or something like this, a print of Fritz Lang's film Metropolis.
Yeah, I think that was Argentina.
Yeah, well, with an entire 20-minute subplot that nobody's ever seen since it was originally released. And, now we've got that. So maybe somewhere out there is that one copy of the Magnificent Ambersons. And, once we find it, then, people like UCLA and their team of restorers can get to work on it. And maybe in my lifetime, they will find that one thing and I'll be able to watch it. So that would be my dream.
You know what? And if you do that, sort of my dream would be to make a documentary about how it was found.
Oh yes, absolutely. Yes, of course, that's true.
Well, we really appreciate your time here, and I have just really enjoyed our conversation.
Oh, me too.
Anything you'd like to share with our audience before we sign off?
Well, I guess I was say this, and maybe I can come back and talk about it to you later on, but the next novel up, which will be out in September, is a book called Fell Stones. That's just one word, Fell Stones, right? And it's another, I think it's another novel of cosmic terror, and I think you will spot that again. In the background looming is a particular Lovecraft story. I won't say which one it is, but I think, I hope I've put in enough acknowledgement of what it reminded me of when I was writing it for nobody to accuse me of, of just sort of barefaced plagiarism, because I think it's more to it than that.
There's a big difference between inspiration and plagiarism, and I'm sure you didn't cross the line.
No, I don't think so. To be honest, I sort of came at the idea independently. And while I was writing it, I thought, hang on, this is such and such by Lovecraft, in a way, it's my version of it. But, so there's another cosmic horror coming from me later this year. And, I hope folk enjoy that one too. And in a completely different vein, and to shock you, I hope, in the best way, the other thing that I've got in the pipeline right now, and very close to completing, is a 70,000-word study of the Three Stooges.
Oh, so again, probably much more personal than you want. I grew up in the 70s in the LA market. And so all these independent TV stations would buy the Three Stooges and things like that, and show them. And so you're talking about my childhood.
Oh, well, okay. Well, you see, my book is about how I came to appreciate them very gradually, over the decades. But the more I looked at them, the more fascinated I become. And also, the more I think, it's complete. It's actually, I'll tell you there is a connection here, because I'd say it's just about as wrong to say about, Lovecraft that all he ever did was say that things were indescribable, use words like eldritch and amorphous and tentacled, I mean, we all know how unfair and unreasonable that is, and how much more there is to Lovecraft than that. Like, a very modulated use of language and a supreme sense of structure. Well, I'd say it's just as unfair to say about the Three Stooges that all they're about is knocking each other about, because there's a great deal more to them than that. And the more I looked, the more I saw. And actually, I tell you, the book is called Six Stooges and Counting, because obviously there were more than three. That's one of the
Carly Joe and Champ.
Exactly, that's right. So this is a personal appreciation, and maybe it'll be out this year, but very soon anyway.
Excellent. Well, we would love to have you on again, not only talk about your new horror writing, but I would love to have a Three Stooges conversation with you.
You're on, David. Fair enough, we'll do it.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me.
Prepare for a spine-tingling, nerve-shattering podcast featuring all your favorite monsters. You won't believe your ears when you listen to Monster Kid Radio. Here your host, Derek M. Cook, and his ever-rotating stable of guests discuss your favorite classic and sometimes not-so-classic monster movies. Subscribe to Monster Kid Radio through iTunes or Stitcher, or visit MonsterKidRadio.net before the next weekly episode of Monster Kid Radio. Go through the archives for interviews with Sarah Karloff, Victoria Price, and Joel Hodgson. Listen to discussions about movies like Creature from the Black Lagoon, Island of Terror, and King Kong. And don't forget convention coverage from Monster Bash and the HP Lovecraft Film Festival. Classic monsters, modern talk, and the head of Rondo Hatton. Only on Monster Kid Radio.
Hey everyone, how you doing? Hope you're doing well. Me and Dave, we're great. You're pretty good, right, Dave?
I'm going to say I am well.
You didn't have to deliver any baby goats during the break, did you?
No, we have not, but we did have to deliver some raisins because there were some goats that... there are some pregnant goats that are not too happy, and they just want these babies out. But, oh well.
Yeah. Cool. I understand that. Spring break around here, and oh man, Dusseldorf and Barbacoa are driving me crazy, and I want them out of the house, but it's raining, so I slipped on down to the radio station to record this. But then I'm going to, Mary Poppins the house with them, sing
laugh so hard you float on the roof?
No. Sing while they clean.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Although that would be kind of cool if you guys were laughing on so hard you were floating to the roof. I might join you.
Yeah, that would be pretty cool. I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to do that, but Singing to children while they clean. Yeah, I can do that. And people are like, that's not what happened to Mary Poppins. Everything cleaned itself. And it's like, yeah, no. I stand and go, if you clean, I won't sing. If you clean, I won't sing. If you clean, I won't sing, children. And they're like, oh, you're the worst. And I'm like, I'm going to sing until you clean your room. They're like, you're the worst Mary Poppins ever. We wish you never shown up. We wish your umbrella broke. Anyway, so what are we talking about? We're talking about Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters right now, right?
Yes, and we are not. Well, maybe we are, but I do not believe that this is related to Steve Grohl. But since you brought it up, do you know what the Foo Fighters were?
Oh yeah. They're a band in the late '90s.
But do you know where they got their title?
Oh yeah, they got it out of the Big Book of Bands. I don't know.
You know what a Foo Fighter is?
I don't know, Dave. What's a Foo Fighter?
Foo Fighter was the name that was used by World War II pilots to explain glowing lights that we now call UFOs that were following the bombers and fighters over Europe and Japan.
Oh, okay.
So maybe there is a connection between the Foo Fighters and GOROTH. More likely, though, I have used, and this is a couple weeks ago, I have used Foo Fighters in role-playing games as fire vampires.
Oh, yeah, and I think, oh, goodness, I'm trying to remember where it comes from. It comes from a comic.
Snuffy Smith, where there's Foo, there is fire.
And Foo is short for fume, which is French for smoke. Where there's smoke, there's fire.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I kind of knew what a Foo Fighter was, but it's like I didn't know how the Foo Fighters got their name, what they based it off of, if they based it off of the UFOs or the what. All right. Cool. So GOROTH. So GOROTH is an outer god. Dave, what's an outer god?
So an outer god is the opposite of an inner god.
Okay, cool.
So these are these very powerful galactic beings that the term god may not be appropriate, but compared to human beings, it's like a human being to an ant.
Okay.
So at least to us, even though they're alien, they are godlike.
Okay.
And especially up here this is sort of the ultimate in Lovecraft's rejection of little green men, people with antennae and pointy ears.
Sure.
This is an alien that by nature is so big, it's as big as a planet.
Okay.
And I think the closest we're going to sort of see this is in the Marvel universe.
Okay.
Ego, the Living Planet, Galactus.
Yeah.
These are huge, giant, sort of powerful aliens.
Entities, yeah.
Exactly. And, I mean, he's also believed to have destroyed the dinosaurs.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. It's like if I see that name, I know it from like books as like from role playing game books as like the planet with an eye, and it's like, oh, okay, yeah. And then it's like a couple years back I looked into it and I was like, oh, okay, that's what it's from. And then I read the story and I'm like, oh. Ugh. But yeah, no, it's I guess it's a outer god, and I guess other outer gods are what, like Yog-Sothoth and Shub-Niggurath.
Yeah. So I always sort of get them confused with and there's always some question, but Nug&amp, one of my favorite, Ubul Salah.
Yeah.
Trying to think of, there's always this question, which side elder thing or is NYARLATHOTEP. He seems to be, or at least claims to be, all of the above.
Yeah.
Yes. Even Azathoth himself is an elder god.
Yeah. Well, NYARLATHOTEP, we'll have to talk about that when we get
to the ends.
When we get to the ends, and then we'll be doing like a year of NYARLATHOTEP. So I'll learn how to say it right even. And I feel like we'll be doing like a month or two of NYARLATHOTEP. Let's see. So GOROTH. Dave, how would you use GOROTH in your game?
So there's a couple of things, and I'll tell you, it's not meant to be, but the thing that reminds me the most to say of GOROTH is a one of the first Rifts World books, Wormworld.
Okay.
Or Wormwood.
Sure.
I'm not sure if you're familiar with that.
No.
So it's Rifts is sort of this cyberpunk / dragon / apocalyptic world where there's different dimensions. And one of them mentioned it's sort of it's kind of medieval, but it's on this living planet where good and evil is fighting. And I kind of, and they were like, on this planet there's these huge deserts that are described basically like the planet's version of a fever. It's trying to get rid of these invading, viruses, which are these demons and stuff, by creating deserts. And so I kind of see that as when I first think of role-playing games with GOROTH. And, I would kind of maybe love to have a world or a game, a D&D game or something on GOROTH. Set it on there on a living, intelligent world.
Yeah. Whoa, that'd be for like a Spelljammer campaign, that would be pretty cool. For like a Planescape, plane jumping campaign, that would be pretty cool. Or even just like the realization that the desert planet that you've been living on for the last how many ever years is a big living planet. Yeah, no.
Your whole adventure is to get to the sea, and you discover that the sea is not a sea, but a 1,000-kilometer eyeball.
Yeah. No, and I was thinking you could even do something along the lines of, there's a lot of like magic to move around from time and space, fly around, do all kinds of things, project all kinds of stuff. What if you had like some sort of like, I don't know, warlocks that were more or less like the Green Lantern Corps and got their power from the planet they lived on?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
or if you're doing a superhero campaign, and you don't want to go quite in the Marvel term, but you want to use, some sort of, destroyer of the universe, but you don't want to use the Marvel names.
Sure.
Substitute it with, GOROTH. You've got some street cred that some people will know what it is, but not know as well as, say, Galactus.
No, definitely. And I think GOROTH is a bit scarier than Galactus. Galactus is a dude in a helmet who's massive and scary and huge, but like an entity the size of a planet that has an eye and shows intelligence. But
the Aphromal prize, or whatever, the human form Galactus, it humanizes him, makes it easier for artists, but it also nikes him down to, he's not as scary because we can relate to him.
Yeah.
He's got eyes. He's got hats. Where Goroth, it's much harder to relate.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's easier to relate to. Yeah. No. This is. I'm like thinking. It's like, what do we pull out of this to like throw at D&D? It's a lot more interesting, or not interesting, but a lot more surprising to players, maybe more interesting, to dehumanize your enemy. I mean, say you have a bunch of aliens come to your planet, and they're all like, I don't know, like look like John Travolta. It's not very scary. John Travolta with like blue skin and tentacle hair. Dreadlocks. Not very scary. Or you have like people in like red jumpsuits and hats. Like in V. That's not very scary. It's when they become dehumanized and you find out they're lizard people. Yeah. Yeah, and it's like Starro in the Suicide Squad. It's pretty scary. I mean, they make it a pretty goofy movie, but once you realize what's going on with... it's very brutal, the movie itself. But once you realize what's going on with Starro, it's like, oh, that's no good. There's like alien invasions that are more scarier than others. And othering and having an other in this state, like having like, it's like... I don't know, these old movies were about communism and racism and stuff like that, but honestly, having an other is pretty darn scary, not knowing who you can trust, and having like a space entity that can change things around you. Who knows what Goroth's abilities are when you're on Goroth? Who knows what...
So here's a scary thing for you.
Sure, yeah.
What happens when the color out of space lands on Goroth?
It goes, wait a minute, where's the water? Or then it sees the eye and goes, aye. That's for a really, really, really bad campaign. I don't know, Dave. I don't know, but that...
Or the color out of space from Goroth.
They could be Goroth eye boogers.
Or not.
Like, there could be things living in the crevices and the cracks in the eyes of Goroth. Who knows what that is? But no, Goroth's like big thing is waking up any great old ones or outer gods sleeping on the planet it passes. So if you've got a bunch of great old ones trapped on your planet asleep, like we do, that's a huge horror, knowing that you have a bunch of trapped great old ones on your planet, and that there's this thing coming that you can't stop because it's the size of a planet. Also, what happens when Goroth enters your atmosphere? I mean, you can be playing D&D, but still a second planet in your system, a second planet, a planet getting really close to your planet or moon or whatever. It's going to mess up your oceans. It's going to mess up your tidal stuff. It's going to block light. It's going to do all kinds of stuff. And it's like, who knows what else? Maybe it has an eye laser. Maybe it can do something with its eye clap, some sort of like power move where it goes...
what if it's a huge giant beholder?
Yeah, no, definitely. What if it's a huge like mother of all beholders? What if it can pull its eye in and reveal a mouth and like actually take chomps out of worlds like I always imagine Galactus doing? But I know that's not how he does it. Yeah, no. What if there are a bunch of things living on Goroth that if it gets close enough to stuff, they can jump off like kind of like fleas or something and go to the next planet. Could be all kinds of monsters spawning and breeding and fighting and battling and drinking from the eye of GOROTH. I mean, maybe it gains sustenance from waking up great old ones. Maybe it feeds off of great old one energy, and that's why it seeks out places full of great old ones. I mean, it's an entity that it exists. I doubt it's going to planets with great old ones for no reason. It's not like well, gotta wake up, gotta go to work, gotta wake up some great old ones and outer gods.
He's more than the great old one's alarm clock.
Yeah, he's more than the great old one's alarm clock. It's like he finds a great old one and is like, oh, I'm gonna zap up its wake up energy. It's like, I'm going to wake it up, and the energy that it shoots out, I'm going to absorb a bunch of it, and that's how it does its thing. Because otherwise, it's just searching out planets, it's searching out various systems, and how fast is this thing moving if it's able to go from this place to that place? I mean, it is an astronomer who finds it, but still...
And does it travel like in warp speed, and then when it gets into a part near
does it
a
drop
planet,
into subspace?
Exactly.
All right. Yeah. No. And if you're playing some sort of like game like Star Trek, imagine. It's like, this is a little bit different than your gaseous god entities. This is a little bit different than your faces floating in space. This is a living planet, and I'm sure they've dealt with living planets on Star Trek, but this is a living planet that, who knows what would happen if GOROTH was in Star Trek. But this is a way to, like, in your space opera game, this is a way to land on GOROTH and fight with little monsters that live on them, which are probably huge monsters in comparison. Maybe GOROTH has no idea that monsters live on it, and when it goes near planets, it's just trying to wake up old ones and get their energy, and like these, Rancor-like monsters, these big old Deathclaw things jump off. Or maybe swarms of eye things. Maybe this is where flying pull-ups come from. They're the eye goo of GOROTH. I mean...
Yeah, like I said, I definitely, and we know that I think the Shan world is devastated by it.
Definitely. What if this is like the Beholder home world in D&D? It's a home world. It's a god. It's both. But yeah, no, you could. Yeah, you have a mobile world that has all kinds of stuff. But yeah, no, it took out the Sean's homeworld, another Ramsey Campbell creation, I believe. The insects from Shagai. It took out Shagai. It took out that whole system. All of the races that the Sean had enslaved, their planets were destroyed as well.
And that could be, maybe GOROTH is the catalyst.
Oh yeah.
Of your campaign, that these other creatures, you don't see GOROTH, but it's making all these other creatures flee.
Sure, yeah.
To the plane or the dimension that the players are in, and so he has this great influence on the story, but never directly appears.
Yeah. Ooh, yeah, I like that. Just, people talk about how when the stars come right, they could be totally wrong and just be talking about GOROTH when GOROTH comes near. Not the stars come right. I was thinking it's like GOROTH can be like a messed up translation. The Necronomicon could be talking about GOROTH and, just like totally mistranslated. when GOROTH comes by, stuff gets weird. It wakes up all of...
And the weird get going.
Oh, yeah. It wakes up all the space monsters, and then it sucks up all their energy. I really like that idea. Like, if Goroth and Godzilla came by each other, Godzilla would, like, blast it, and it'd be like, oh, cool, thanks, brah. And then fly off, being like, oh, man, that was good. Monster energy. Drinks.
Yes.
Is not a sponsor of this show.
No.
Yeah. Anything else? Like,
that's really all I've got for Goroth today.
Yeah, I'm like thinking, you got a planet-sized monster. You know, you put stuff on it, make stuff jump off of it, make it affect things. It's like all the stuff that like Great Old Ones and Outer Gods are known to do. Yeah, it's like, I don't think anyone worships it. Maybe other outer gods are familiar with it and are like, oh yeah, GHROTH does great stuff. Not really a god of time or space or fertility or anything. I guess kind of like, I don't know, the god of, all right, time to wake up.
Yeah, well, it's the harbinger of the end. So, in ways, it's kind of, I think, and this is the human interpretation, it's sort of an entropy god or a god of decay or destruction.
Yeah.
Or even a god of maybe change. But, yeah, I don't think, other than, like, you know, the lone crazy people, I don't think there's a particularly cult of it.
No.
But, you know, let's say, though, let's say that you're doing like a near future or a cyberpunk campaign. You could have a gang cult that worships it. It's not real.
Oh, yeah.
It's not even necessarily real.
Yeah.
But, you know, this cult thinks that it needs to, you know, cause destruction to bring Goroth.
Or appease Goroth. Maybe because of natural disasters that are happening, tidal waves, earthquakes, you know, horrific storms, like just like thinking that like whatever post-apocalyptic near future, current day, climate change stuff that's happening is a result of a Goroth. And, you know, the harbinger of the end of days. I really kind of like that, Dave. Yeah. And, the players don't know if it's real or not. They don't know if it's real or not, but it's like, yeah, no, we've been worshiping this guy, or, you know, appeasing it by doing sacrifices and fighting off climate change. And you could, or these terrible storms or these volcanoes or whatever, you could put that in any campaign setting. If you have volcanoes, if you have tsunamis, if you have earthquakes, if you have like, even like drought and like tornadoes and tsunamis, you can just like be like, oh yeah, no, there's this eye planet that is out there. You can see it with the telescope. And it's making all this stuff happen. And it's told us, if we do these things, it'll stop. It'll go away. You know, it's like...
And that's the sort of the hardest... The villains that think they're doing good.
Yeah, and it's like, maybe you can prove that Goroth is there and, like, mess up the person who doesn't believe you. And then they'll go, oh, you're right. We do need to do this. Like, what if the crazy person or like the cult leader, all the cult leader needs to do is show, hey, this eye thing exists. This eye thing has been like tracked down. There's like stories of other cultures and other civilizations. There's an ancient civilization of people that existed back when the dinosaurs existed. They wrote about this thing. It killed the dinosaurs. It killed them. They're able to travel into the future to avoid being killed by it again. They skip time to avoid this thing, man. And, you know, he's like, you bring up a few things, and it's like, and that's why we need to kill people. And then it's like, oh my goodness, throw in late night volleyball and sleep deprivation, and you got yourself a cult, baby.
Yep.
So yeah, I guess, hey, GOROTH, go start a cult in whatever campaign, but not in real life, because I did not tell anyone to start a cult. Ironically,
there's enough of those out there already.
Yeah. And if you do start a cult, don't bring me into it, please. I don't have time for anything. And I think that's it for this amazing episode of People's Guide to the Cthulhu Mythos. Your hosts have been DB Spitzer, that is myself, and David Heath, to my virtual right across from me. And we are brought to you by Copper Cow Coffee and a slew of other sponsors that you can check down in the show notes and find out more about. Music, as always, is by DB Spitzer. And anything you have to say before we ride off into that dark night there, Dave?
No, but have a good one, and we may have goat babies for the next episode.
All right. Thank you. And also, special thanks to Ramsey Campbell for coming on to the show. Super great to have you on the show. Thanks again, Ramsey. Just a reminder, we do have Join a Cult shirts in our shirt shop if you go to pgttcm.com. And also we have that really cool Rallier Charles Tell Your Ma, Tell Your Pa, I'll ship you down to ITHAQUA available still. So check out pgttcm.com and buy yourself a t-shirt. Subscribe to our, subscribe to the blog, subscribe to the Apple, subscribe to the Podbean, subscribe to us, follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. And yeah, thank you again. And thanks again to Ramsey Campbell. And thanks again to our patrons. And you can become a patron by going to the patron link in the show notes. Patrons get an unedited access to an unedited shows, including unedited interviews. So, yeah. All right. Thank you again so much, and we'll see you next time. Produced and edited by DB Spitzer at the KZOM Studios in Oleander, Oregon. Dave's part is recorded at Uncle Owen's farm, just outside of Oleander. And music, of course, is by DB Spitzer. Thank you again so much for listening to the show. And check out pgttcm.com, where all of our stuff is connected.